Welcome to the Frequency Labyrinth. I am Adrienne McDonald, your host. This podcast is for you if you're done with surface level self-help and ready for something deeper and actually transformative. Around here, we work with ancient wisdom, human design, gene keys, and shamanic practices, not as knowledge to collect, but as tools to live by. This isn't about one size fits all. It's about learning to work with your energy, your design, and your life. This is about integration and embodiment. We go deep here with ancient wisdom, practical integration, so that you can develop ironclad self-trust. Let's get into it. Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back. I'm back from my break. I'm sitting in what I can only describe as utter controlled chaos. My office is completely turned upside down, furniture in the center of the room. Everything I own in here is like spread across every surface. There's fresh paint on the walls that's still drying. And I've been doing an overhaul that I thought would already be done. But here we are. But this tracks a little bit to what's going on in the cosmic mix. This Capricorn New Moon that's upcoming isn't about necessarily fresh starts with a blank slate. It's about wrapping up, consolidating, turning the page on what's been building. It's about getting your house in order, sometimes literally, like I am, so that you can actually move forward without dragging the clutter with you. I've been purging as I go things that made sense in an earlier version of my work, my practice, my life. Well, some of those don't make sense anymore. And instead of just shuffling them around or finding a new shelf to put them on, I'm purging and letting them go, making space, getting honest about what belongs in the next chapter. And that's the energy of this lunation. And we're going to talk about what's happening, astrologically speaking, and human design speaking, what to watch for. But then I want to take it a little deeper because most people treat new moons and full moons like isolated events. Press a button, set an intention, release something, move on. But that's not really how lunations work. They're cycles. And when you understand the full arc of a lunation cycle, you stop treating these cosmic moments like random hits of inspiration and can really start working with them as a coherent intelligence that's unfolding over time. And I feel like when you work with a lunation cycle like this, it draws you in closer with working in concert with the universe. So let's start with what's happening right now. So we got a new moon happening on Sunday. That's happening at 28 degrees Capricorn. That's a later degree. We're nearing the end of the sign. In astrology, late degrees carry culmination energy. They're not about necessarily all in the initiation phase. They're about finishing, consolidating, wrapping up what's been in motion so you can step into what's next. Although I do think this is a great lunation to set some very grounded intentions for the new 2026 calendar year. And I feel like that matters because next week all these planets have been stacked up in Capricorn. The Sun, Mercury, Mars, Venus, they're all moving into Aquarius. You know, Capricorn builds structure, it's very disciplined. Aquarius experiments with what that structure makes possible. But you can't do the Aquarius part if the Capricorn part isn't stable yet. So this new moon is like a checkpoint. It's what's structurally sound, what's been held together with duct tape and willpower, what needs to be tightened up before you add more movement to the system. And this new moon is also trining, it's like 1 degree off of trining Uranus and Taurus. Mercury and Mars are conjoining in late Capricorn this weekend, also trining Uranus. And that's a lot of support for insight, for breakthrough, for sudden clarity that sort of cuts through all the bullshit and cuts through the fog. Uranus doesn't blow things up. Uranus can blow things up. But what it really does is it never does that without having liberation in mind. It offers a cosmic course correction, the kind where you suddenly see, oh, this isn't working out the way I thought it was, or, ooh, I need to move in this direction. And Capricorn is all about practical application. It's a calculated risk. It's building something that lasts because it's designed to handle pressure, not just momentum. Uranus in the configuration says, yeah, you can shift, you can change this direction, keep it grounded, keep it real. Now let's bring in Human Design Gate 60, which we have moved into today, Friday, when this episode drops. Gate 60 is the gate of acceptance, and the sun and the moon are meeting up in Human Design Gate 60 for this lunation as well. And this gate for Gene Keys moves through the spectrum of limitation, realism, and justice. Now, Gate 60 lives in the root center, which is one of the 2 pressure centers in Human Design chart, and this is important. Root pressure is physical. It's embodied pressure. It's not necessarily mental. It's not emotional. It's the kind of pressure you feel in your body when something has reached the edge of what it can hold. Gate 60 governs creative intelligence under constraint. It's the pressure to build when a structure, any structure of any type, hits its limit. And it's not necessarily because something's wrong, but because something needs refinement, something needs discernment. And this is where I feel like Gate 60 gets a bad rap. People hear the word limitation and think that's, restriction, scarcity, things being taken away. But that's not really what this gate does. Gate 60 is a reality check. It's like, what's real right now? What can this structure actually hold? What happens if I stop pretending I have unlimited capacity? Because none of us have unlimited capacity. It really depends on the season of life you're in, and coupled with, what do you want to do, right? It's realism. It's not resignation. It's orientation. I've been talking a lot about orientation over the last couple of months. When Gate 60 is active, frustration shows up when you've been trying to override reality. And I'm not talking about from looking at everything negatively. I'm talking about looking at things realistically. Like in my old corporate job, timelines that were never realistic on projects, energy levels, you don't have commitments that you can't sustain without depleting yourself. I've talked a lot about reciprocity over the past several months. All of this is culminating where you're really looking at the lay of the land for what it is, not for what you want it to be. I've talked about that in relation to people as well. You have to look at somebody else's capacity. It doesn't make them wrong necessarily. It doesn't make you wrong necessarily. It's just, it is what it is. And this frustration that you may feel is not punishment. It's just look at it as feedback without judgment. Gate 60 doesn't want to push past anything. It wants you to build with what you have in present time. So when you combine this gate with a Capricorn New Moon, a sign that already understands consequence, time, durability, you get a lunation that's less about all the things and much more about structural honesty, right? This isn't a dream big and manifest. It's okay, let's look at some facts here. What needs to change so that it doesn't collapse later? This isn't about going to a self-help conference where you get all hyped up and you come home and you crash. This is let's look at what we've got to work with and get really freaking creative with it. So 3 things to watch for during this lunation as we move through this lunation cycle from this new moon through the full moon. Here are 3 things to pay attention to. First, pressure that doesn't respond to effort. If you've been pushing harder and that's not helping, that's gate 60 talking. That's not a signal that you need to necessarily go for it even deeper. That's okay, let's see a little bit more about adjustment and refinement. It could be adjusting to a different strategy. It could be getting more disciplined, but something needs to shift. And it shows up as a project that keeps stalling no matter how much time you give it. The relationship dynamic that doesn't shift no matter how many conversations you have. The work routine that leaves you depleted even though you're quote unquote doing everything right. Gate 60 asks you to stop equating effort with progress. Sometimes the issue isn't that you're not working hard enough. It's that you're working with a design that can't hold what you're trying to build. And you need to shift. Second, the urge to fix it versus redesigning it. Capricorn wants things to work long term. That means that the answer isn't always just repairing. It's a whole redesign. And with Uranus's support, you might get a sudden insight on how to restructure something, a different way to approach your schedule, your finances, your creative practice, your boundaries. And the temptation will be to keep the old framework and just tweak it. But with this lunation, you have to ask yourself, what if the framework itself is the problem? You're not looking for band-aids here. You're looking for structural shifts that remove friction instead of just managing it better. And third, what gets easier once you stop pretending that you have unlimited capacity, as much as our world loves to reward that. In a lot of ways, you do have unlimited capacity in creative thought, etc. But I'm talking about like the day-to-day chop wood, carry water type of vibe here, because that's what Capricorn is all about. This one's big. Gate 60 is going to show you where you've been operating as if limits don't apply to you, where you have been overriding your own needs, your own bandwidth, your own reality, because you thought you should, quote unquote, be able to handle more. And acceptance here isn't giving up. Again, it's energy reclamation. It's when are you going to stop fighting the terrain and start building with it? And when you do that, everything shifts, not because you lowered your standards, because you're finally working with what's real instead of what you wish was true. Now, I'm going to shift gears here for a minute and talk about what most people, I feel like, miss about lunations, myself included for a long time. I'm a Cancer rising, so the moon rules my charts. I'm super in tune to the moon cycles. And when I really started looking at it holistically, that was, I really did feel like that moved me more into working with concert with the universe instead of just the hit or miss thing, because I think ritual helps with consistency. So we've talked about what's happening with this specific new moon and what to watch for as it unfolds, but now I want to zoom out because there's a bigger conversation that I want to have about how lunations actually work. Now, most people treat new moons and full moons like standalone events, isolated moments where you set your intentions or release things, and then you move on to the next one. Now, that isn't necessarily wrong, but there is a deeper thing that you can be working with. You know, new moons or plant seeds, start fresh, set intention. Full moons or culmination, release, let go. But you've just heard me talk about this particular new moon is a type of culmination because of the sign it's in. And again, look, it's not wrong just to work with new and full moons. That's absolutely part of what these lunations do. But it is incomplete because when you treat them as separate moments, you miss the intelligence of the cycle itself. Lunations aren't random cosmic hits. They're phases of a continuous process. The new moon doesn't exist without the full moon that preceded it. The full moon doesn't make sense without the new moon that came before it. They're not opposites. They're part of the same arc. And when you understand that arc and when you start tracking that cycle from new moon to full moon and back again, you may find yourself stop reacting to these transits and start working with them at a deeper level. So let's break this down. There's 8 phases of a lunation cycle, and each one has a specific function. And when you understand what each phase is for, you stop forcing the same energy through the whole cycle and start working with a more natural rhythm. So phase 1 is the new moon, and it's all about seeding an intention. This is where the cycle begins. The sun and moon are conjunct. They're in the same place. They're merging energies. The moon is dark. You can't see in the sky. And symbolically, this is about conception. This is where something new gets seeded. The new moon isn't necessarily about having super clarity. It's not about knowing exactly what you're building or what's going to unfold. It's about planting something and trusting that it's germinating in the dark. Seeds need darkness. They need the pressure of the soil around them to crack open and start growing. Like that phase is like what wants to begin? What quality do I want to cultivate? What direction feels right? Even if I can't see the full path yet. And most people rush this phase. They want immediate results. They want instant clarity. That's not how this works. The new moon is asking for trust in what's forming beneath the surface. And then we move into phase 2, which is the waxing crescent. This is the emergence and commitment. A few days after the new moon, the first slither of light appears. The waxing crescent is the tiny edge of the moon becoming visible again. This is emergence energy. What got seeded at the new moon is starting to show itself. It's fragile. It's breaking through the surface. And this is where you need to make the commitment to tend it, to water it, to protect it, to give it the conditions it needs to grow. And the waxing crescent says, am I willing to commit to this? What does this seed need from me right now? This is where you're starting to take the first small actions, making the first adjustments, creating the conditions for growth. And this phase can feel very tentative because you're not sure if what's emerging is going to make it. It's the uncertainty of it. You're learning to trust the process, but still vulnerable. And then phase 3 is the first quarter. It's action and decision. About a week after the new moon, you hit the first quarter moon. And the moon is half lit. It's at a 90-degree angle to the sun. It's the first major challenge point in the cycle. This is where you start encountering resistance. You have to make decisions. You have to choose what's worth the effort, what needs to be released or adjust. This sometimes can feel like crisis energy, not like crisis and disaster, but like crisis, like decision point time. And the first quarter asks, what am I actually willing to work for? What obstacles are showing up that this needs refinement? Where do I need to push through? Where do I need to pivot? And a lot of people abandon things at the first quarter because they're hitting a resistance and thinking that it means that they're on the wrong path. But this resistance phase, at this phase, it's information. It's the cycle asking you to get clear about your commitment and adjust your approach as needed. And then phase 4, waxing gibbous, refinement and preparation. Almost after the first quarter, the moon continues to grow. The waxing gibbous phase is the almost full moon. You can see most of it, but not quite all of it yet. It's refinement energy. You're close to culmination, but you're not there yet. This phase asks you to fine-tune, to adjust the details, to prepare for what's about to be revealed. At the full moon, the waxing gibbous can feel a lot like impatience, like you're so close to it, but you're not quite ready. But this phase is really essential because it's where you tie up loose ends. It's where you're making the last adjustments before like the big reveal. Think of it like days before a launch, a presentation, or a deadline. You're still doing that final polish. You're making sure everything's in place. The waxing gibbous asks, what still needs attention before this reaches full visibility? And phase 5, the full moon, the illumination, the revelation. The full moon is the peak. It's the sun and moon opposite one another. Maximum tension, maximum light. Whatever got seeded at the new moon is now fully visible. It's reached its full expression, or at least the full revelation. And again, there's a bigger thing that we could talk about here with synodic cycles, but maybe I'll talk about that on a later podcast. This is where people get twisted. They think the full moon is about completion. It's like you've arrived at the finish line and you're done, but that's not what's happening here. The full moon is about illumination. It shows you what's real. It reveals the gap between what you intended and what actually showed up. It highlights the stress points, the places where the structure may be weak, the places where you were operating on assumption instead of reality. And the full moon can really feel intense because it doesn't let you hide. Whatever's been building, the good, the messy, the unresolved, it's all visible now. And you can see what worked and what didn't. And you can see where you need to course correct again. But here's the gift. You can't refine what you can't see. So the full moon gives you information to make better choices moving forward. It's not judgment, it's revelation. The full moon asks what's being illuminated. What truth can I no longer avoid? Then you move into phase 6, which is the waning gibbous, which is about gratitude and sharing. Now, right after the full moon, you enter that waning gibbous phase. The moon is almost full, but is starting to decrease. This is also called the dissemination phase because it's where you're being shown what you learned and you are being, you might share out what you've learned. It's like, what did I discover at the full moon that needs to be communicated? What wisdom needs to be passed on? What insight needs to be integrated and shared? And this isn't necessarily about broadcasting to the world. It can be as simple as having a conversation, journaling what you've learned, teaching someone else what you now understand. This phase is about taking what got revealed at the full moon and making meaning from it. The waning gibbous can feel reflective, but also still energizing. You're processing, but you're still in that glow of the full moon revelation. You're starting to understand what it all meant. And then, a week after the full moon, you enter into phase 7. You hit that last quarter moon again. The moon is half lit, but now it's decreasing. And this is the crisis point in the cycle. This last quarter asks what needs to be released, what's no longer serving, what needs to end so the next cycle can be clean. And again, this is a lot of people resist this type because releasing is uncomfortable, letting go is hard, even though something isn't working. But that last quarter doesn't really give you a choice. If you try to carry everything forward, you'll just drag dead weight into the new cycle. This last quarter is about reorientation. It's about clearing out what's complete, what's no longer aligned, what was revealed at the full moon is unsustainable. What am I willing to let go of? What do I need to forgive or release so I can move forward? And then the phase 8, which is the waning crescent. This is the final phase before the cycle begins again. It's the last sliver of the moon before it disappears entirely. This is the balsamic phase, the composting phase, the surrender phase. I was actually born in this phase, which is always interesting to learn the phase of the moon that you were born under, because that can tell you a lot how you deal with letting go. The waxing crescent is asking you to rest, to go inward, to stop producing and start integrating, to let everything that's happened in the cycle compost into wisdom. This is, I feel like, the most underrated phase of the cycle, because the culture that glorifies productivity and momentum, the waning crescent, it may feel like you're not doing enough, but you're not doing nothing. You're processing, you're healing, you're making space for the next cycle to begin. The waning crescent asks what needs to rest, what needs to be surrendered, what wants to dissolve so something new can be born. If you skip this phase and rush from the last quarter into the next new moon without giving yourself time to rest and integrate, you're going to burn out. You repeat the same patterns. You carry unprocessed material into the next cycle and wonder why nothing changes. So the waning crescent is where the cycle completes itself. It's where you return to emptiness so that fullness can emerge again. So when you start tracking the lunations through all 8 phases, instead of just hitting the new moon and the full moon, you could see where a lot of things can shift. When you stop expecting the new moon to give you instant clarity, it's a seeding phase. Darkness and not knowing are part of the process. You stop panicking at the first quarter when you hit resistance. You understand it's a decision point and not a sign that you're on the wrong path. You stop treating the full moon like a cosmic deadline, like everything should be perfect. You understand it's an illumination phase. Whatever shows up is information and not judgment. It's not a reason to just freak out. You stop rushing through the waning phases, and you understand release and integration and rest aren't optional. They're how wisdom gets embedded, how you avoid repeating the same cycles with like different packaging, if you will, different dress up. And then you start to see the patterns. You start to notice, what I was seeing at last new moon in Capricorn is connecting to what's culminating now. The themes that showed up in the first quarter are the same themes that need releasing in the last quarter. I'm not starting over every lunation. I'm spiraling through the same territory at deeper levels with more clarity each time. And that's the intelligence of the lunation cycle. It's not linear, it's a spiral. It's not do this thing and check the box. It's cyclical. It's layered. You can see the evolution of it. So, now that you understand all 8 phases, that is how you can work with them. You don't need me to tell you what's going to happen in each phase. You need to learn how to track it yourself, because specific themes, specific revelations, specific challenges will be unique to your life and what you're working with. But the structure of the cycle is always the same. So that's what to pay attention to. So in each cycle, pay attention to this. At each new moon, ask yourself what wants to begin. What quality am I cultivating? What direction feels right, even without the clarity, full clarity. Don't force it. Just notice what's pulling your attention, what keeps coming up, what feels like it wants space to grow. And during a waxing crescent, what's emerging? What small actions am I taking? What does the seed need from me right now? Track what's starting to show. Notice what feels fragile, what needs protection. At the first quarter, what resistance am I encountering? What decisions have to be made? Where do I need to commit or pivot? Don't run from resistance. Let it inform you. This is where you get clear about what you're actually willing to work for. During waxing gibbous, what needs refinement? What details need attention? What am I preparing for? This is your final polish phase. Notice what feels still loose or unfinished. And at the full moon, what's being eliminated? What truth can I no longer avoid? What's the gap between what I intended and what's actually showing up? And don't judge what gets revealed, just see it clearly, because that's just more information. During the waning gibbous, what did I learn? What wisdom wants to be shared or integrated? Who needs to hear this? Process what the full moon showed you. Make meaning from it. The last quarter, what needs to be released, complete? What am I willing to let go of? This is often, like I said, the hardest phase, but it's essential. Don't carry dead weight into the next cycle. And then during waxing crescent, what needs to rest? What needs to dissolve? What am I willing to What am I willing to surrender into? What am I ready to surrender? Give her permission to do nothing, to integrate, to let the cycle compost into wisdom. And the more you track these cycles, the more you'll see your own patterns. You'll notice that certain phases are easier for you and certain phases are harder. And you'll notice the themes that show up in the new moon often connect to what's being illuminated at the full moon. You'll notice what you resist releasing at the last quarter often shows up again at the next new moon, asking to be dealt with. That is the work. Not me telling you what's going to happen, but you learning to read like the rhythm of your own life through these cycles. Now, that is the reason why I keep coming back to lunations, not because they're magic, although they feel magical sometimes, but there's definitely something, there really is something magical about tracking them, because they teach you how to work with cycles instead of fighting them. And they teach you that darkness isn't failure, it's gestation. They teach you that resistance isn't necessarily a sign that you're on the wrong path, it's a decision point. They teach you that illumination isn't the end, it's the middle. It's information, it's not completion. They teach you that release isn't loss, it's composting. And they teach you that rest isn't laziness, it's integration. They teach you that beginning again isn't starting over, it's just spiraling deeper into the same essential questions that bring wisdom every time. When you work with a full lunation cycle, all 8 phases, not just the highlights, you stop expecting yourself to be on all the time. You stop treating every transit like it should produce immediate results, as much as we would like them to. And to be frank, though, there are moments where you do see instantaneous things, especially when you put Uranus into the mix. But you start to trust the rhythm, the seeding and the emergence, the building, the crisis, the illumination, the release, the integration, and the rest. You'll notice that the themes reoccurring in your life aren't necessarily random. They're not evidence that you're stuck or doing it wrong. They're evidence that you're in a cycle. And the cycle is working how it should work, moving you deeper into understanding with each rotation. So as we move through this Capricorn New Moon, this turning of the page, wrap it up, get your house in order energy, I do invite you to track and play with the phases for yourself. Not because I told you what to expect, because I feel like if you're learning to read the intelligence of the cycle, it can make a big difference in your own life. Notice what gets seeded now. Notice what emerges. Notice where you hit resistance in the decisions you make. Notice what gets refined. Notice what the full moon illuminates. Notice what you share. Notice what you release. And notice what rests. Track the full arc, because that's where real intelligence lives, not just in the peaks and valleys, but the rhythm underneath everything. Hopefully my office will be back together by the time the new moon peaks. The paint will be dry and the furniture back in place, because this is driving me nuts. It's a small thing, but it's the work of this lunation, wrapping up and turning the page. Now, I know most people think they have already figured out their word or theme of the year, and maybe you chose something back in December or early January. But here's the thing. I do have a free guide, Finding Your Word of the Year Through Human Design, and it goes a lot deeper than just the surface level, pick your word that sounds inspiring approach. It uses your human design chart to help you identify what this specific year is asking of you based on your energetic blueprint. Now, not necessarily what sounds good on paper, but what's actually aligned with how you're designed to move through cycles of growth and transformation. So if you are curious about going deeper, or if that word you picked isn't quite landing the way you thought it would, the guide is free and it is available in the show notes. And before anyone asks, yes, it's been revised since 2025. 2026's guide is different. I feel like this year is finally getting started. And I think it was good to let the year warm up slowly. As I said in my newsletter to my newsletter folks, because there's some power when you honor the wintering that needs to happen. So, and now we can start turning the page. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just need to trust the cycle and let it do what it does. That's it for me today. Remember to find beauty every day and seek the magic in the mundane. Thanks for tuning in today. As always, take what resonates, leave the rest. Let whatever landed move through you in whatever way it needs to or wants to. And also, if you want to explore more, you'll find more information in the show notes. If this episode stirred something in you, please share it out or leave a quick review. It helps so much and I really appreciate it. And remember, this work is about integration and it always starts with self-trust.